between English Anglicans to the east who came in the 1600s and had been here a while and definitely felt that they were the aristocrats of the location. They also had a lot of money. West of I-95 is the Scotch-Irish who have only just gotten there and are farmers. And basically, the situation is that the Scots know the English are Sassenachs and are going to screw them every chance they get. And the English perceive the Scots, who all got there in the 1700s, to be trailer trash. And so the scene is set for a lot of people to not cooperate with each other, okay? And what's going to happen now that the Hanover Presbytery has picked out a place that is the minimum amount of travel trouble for Presbyterians who want to go to college in Virginia, they got to get the government to agree to set up a college. And the government is controlled, as long as it's a colony, by the colonial governor, who is an Anglican and is not about to approve this, or the legislature. And they have the legislature gerrymandered to an extent that they absolutely control it, and it's not going to approve anything. So they have to figure out a way of getting this approved. Now, in fact, the word college is not copyrighted or anything, but it is true that you can't call anything a college legally unless the legislature has chartered it. And, the colonial governor. But now that we're ready to start the war, the legislature is being more reasonable, but it's still all Anglicans. And what happens is that a college is a collection of scholars. College, read together. You can have an academy with only one instructor. Plato, Aristotle, you get the idea. So it's okay to start an academy. You can do that without anybody's permission. What you can't do is start a college without anybody's permission. So what Hampden-Sydney would like to do is to start a college and not call it that. Okay? And then we'll work on somehow getting it through the legislature. So what do you have to have for an effective college? Well, you got to have an effective executive leadership, meaning board of trustees, if you have trustees. If what this is the committee of the Hanover Presbytery, it's got to have people who know what they're doing and really want a college there. That's step one. And Hampden-Sydney came out of that okay. The Presbytery committee was very much wanted to have college here, and they knew how to get it done pretty well. Then you have to get a good president of the college. Although originally, since it's not a college, he's not the president of the college, he's rector of the academy, okay? And that worked out all right because they got Samuel Stanley Smith, and we'll get back to him in just a minute. You need a physical plant. That's hard and it's expensive. And what we got is a lot full of trees. And the first thing that's going to happen when we try to start a physical plant is we're going to cut a lot of trees down. So we really are working for nothing on the physical plant. Then you need to be able to recruit good faculty members, which means knowing how many you need, among other things, and what specialties you need. But the president probably can do that. And then finally, you need to recruit a student body. And that's going to be a little tricky because you can advertise to get students who are male and the right age. What you can't do is assure what their level of education is coming in. There are no public schools anywhere in the United States. Public schools showed in Massachusetts in the 1840s. In the South, they mostly come in the 1860s and 1870s. And what every college has to do, even if it is a real college and gets to say college, all it wants to, they have to run an academy whose purpose in life is remedial courses that will get the kid who comes in who is 13, but his parents want him to go to school, and there are not any other schools around, so he might as well go to this one. And his parents have been trying to teach him at home, and he knows a fair amount of stuff, but nobody but the parents knows how much he knows. This is a real problem. Every college had this problem, and every college ran an academy to jack people up to where they could be college level. So Hampden-Sydney had to have known in advance what they were headed for, but they were going to try to have a college where they taught the courses at college level, but just didn't award degrees because you can't award degrees. And as soon as we get chartered, we'll give out some degrees for all the people that finished satisfactorily before this. And now it's time to start doing things. And at the moment, what we have is a bunch of Prince Edward County farmers who are hardworking and smart and experienced in running activities, but have never run a college before and didn't go to college. They just know they want to build one here. What's the best thing to do? Well, try to find somebody that's done it before successfully. So here we are in the United States, momentarily prior to the Revolution, and there are some colleges around, but only one of them is Presbyterian. And that's a real consideration. Come on. But you got to understand something about the Presbyterian Church. I'm sorry, but this is going to take about 10 minutes, but you're not going to realize the problems the college is facing until you go through this. Presbyterians were all the way at the right wing of they were the libertarians of the Protestant Reformation. Presbyterians felt that the Bible was the sole reference source for Christians who wanted to know about their own personal behavior. And what you wanted was the Old Testament as interpreted in the lights of the Jesus teaching in the New Testament. And if it wasn't in the New Testament, you couldn't use it. Now, it turns out, no surprise, that the Pope is not in the New Testament. But neither are archbishops or bishops or even priests. In terms of church government, the only thing that's in the New Testament is that congregations that got a substantial size and had a lot of things going on could sort of elect an executive committee to do the ordinary routine things. And the executive committee would be chosen from members who were older and had more experience and therefore probably better judgment. And so these were the elders, or in Greek presbyters, which is how it got to be the Presbyterian Church. Nobody else could believe that these people were going to operate without any priests at all. But The problem with having only everybody reading the Bible for themselves, good thing, and only having congregational limits on what you can say is that somebody needs to interpret the hard places in the Bible for you. And there are hard places. And so the Presbyterians developed the rule that every congregation had to have a pastor. And the pastor had to have had a college education, which included Greek and Latin, and enough theological philosophy type courses to be able to give an authentic answer when somebody asks a question. And this pastor he's not a priest, and he doesn't have any authority in the sense that a priest does. He is just a teaching elder, where the other people who make all the decisions about budget and things are ruling elders. Yeah, well, okay. And the religious education that the pastor gets has to be consistent with Presbyterian theology. Now, you either have to go to a college that is a religious college and has a bunch of religious stuff in the curriculum for everybody, or you have to go to a standard college and then go an extra year and only take religion courses, okay? If you're in Virginia and want to go to college, the obvious place is William and Mary. William and Mary is run by the Anglicans. The courses on church government at William and Mary are all going to involve the prerogatives of the bishop and the archbishop and so on. They're not going to be a review of Presbyterian religious philosophy, let alone or church government. So we got to have a Presbyterian college. There's no other way around it. You can't get your graduate experience by going to William and Mary. Okay, where is a Presbyterian college? Answer, we got one. All the Presbyterians who went to Pennsylvania and stopped got there before the ones got down in Southern Virginia. And they were in the state that allowed you to build churches anywhere you could afford them and run this any way you wanted to, because the friends who ran, William Penn Jr., who ran the Pennsylvania government, were very tolerant about this kind of thing. So by the 1740s, they had something like 30 years worth of settlers in there, and they had a pretty effective system, but they needed to be able, it was growing all the time, and they were putting up new churches, which meant they needed new pastors, which meant they needed somebody who could get Presbyterian church government and religious philosophy, theology, out of their college experience, or at least graduate school. And they faced the same problem. If you're in Pennsylvania, at that point, you can only go north to Harvard or Yale, or south to William and Mary, and both of those are a long trip. So in the early 1740s, the Presbyterians in Pennsylvania got together to organize a college, which would not be in Pennsylvania, okay? It'll be in an intermediate location, like about halfway between Harvard and William and Mary. And we'll put it in a place that's easy to travel to get to by ship, which is faster and cheaper and easier than anything you do on a horse. So they say, we'll start the college in northern New Jersey, which is just about halfway south. And it's easy to sail into New York and take a horse taxi for 10 miles and get to the college. So they started the College of New Jersey. And New Jersey was willing to play the game by Pennsylvania rules. And so New Jersey went ahead and gave them a charter in the 1740s. And they started running a Presbyterian college with lots of Presbyterian theology built into the courses. And you could go through there and qualify to be an ordained Presbyterian minister. Okay. Now, the way the Presbyterians are set up is that you got one worshiper, and if a bunch of them get together for Sunday services, then you have a congregation. And the first one of those in the U.S. happened about 1620. Not 1607 when everybody came to Jamestown, because didn't know Presbyterians come on that one. Once you have a fairly dense population of Presbyterians in a reasonably small area, 75 miles across, something like that, then it's worth getting them together on a regular basis to make sure that everybody's singing from the same sheet of music, theologically speaking. And that group is called a presbytery. And the first presbytery in the New World was formed in 1706. It was in New York, but ignore that. It had gotten down here by the time we're talking about in 1775. Once you get a lot of the population in Presbyterian church that goes up, and you get a lot of presbyteries, then you collect a lot of those together and make a synod. And that didn't happen until we actually had won the war and the states were independent federal states. And so a synod was just a synod of Virginia, and the synod of North Carolina, and the synod of Tennessee, and whatever. And that's okay. And only that's 1786, and about 3 years after that, they said, okay, there will be a master organization for the whole country called General Assembly. And that's where we are. But at the time Presbyterians are considering putting up a college at Hampden-Sydney, there isn't anything any bigger than a presbytery available. We're in Hanover Presbytery. Hanover is a county that Ashland is in, and it had 3 Presbyterian churches, but the only reason it had them was that they had applied to the Bishop of London to be allowed to build them. And he said, I've thought about it, and the answer is no. And they said, but Parliament passed a law saying that church construction was not to be prohibited any longer. Only about 5 years ago, this is 1740s. And the bishop said, I don't care, that's only for the home country, it doesn't apply to the colonies. And a bunch of Ashland Presbyterians ground their teeth off flat and appealed to the London courts, which meant hiring British lawyers. And this went on for years. And every time the courts ruled against them, they appealed. And eventually, the then king had to decide this. And he looked funny and said, well, you know, I think Parliament really meant everybody that's English when they said that. So yes, you're going to have to let them build these 3 churches. So they did. And there were 3 churches around Ashland. And there were a bunch more places that had the money and the membership. And they applied to the Bishop of London, and he said, not going to do this. I don't agree with the court ruling. And eventually they got him to realize he was bound by decisions by the king, not by the courts below the royal level, but he was bound by decisions of the king. And he eventually started letting these up, but not much, and not many of them got built before the revolution started. And you can see a little bit of discussion of that there. The one Presbyterian college that did exist was the college in New Jersey, now known as Princeton. They spent 150 years being known as the College of New Jersey until the governor of Jersey decided he wanted to put up subsidiary colleges around the state, like Longwood and James Madison and so on, he wanted that series of secondary colleges, and they were going to be called the College of New Jersey at Newark or someplace. But the College of New Jersey phrase absolutely was trademarked, okay? The people who ran that college over in Princeton had been calling it that for 150 years. So New Jersey politics took over. And it was arranged that the state would trade. By giving up the name, the state would agree to turn the educational institution into Princeton University. They had been wanting to be a university for years, and the legislature didn't want to do it, but if you get something they really want, it'll pay off. So at that point, they're Princeton University, and all these other colleges get built. And the interesting thing is all of them have subsequently got different names now. They're not called that, but anyway. So this is the building that got built after the College of New Jersey. This is 1756. And this got built after the College of New Jersey had existed in very small numbers in parsonages in Elizabeth and Newark for about 10 years while they raised money. And they raised a bunch of money and built this building, except without that cockamamie cupola on top. It had a cupola, but only big enough for a bell, okay, like Winston. Venable. And, but it was that size. That's a big building. When it was built, it was the largest stone masonry building in the United States, okay? And they started using it in 1756, and Congress met there for about 2 years after they'd been run out of New York and also out of Philadelphia. The treaty, George Washington received the formal presentation of the treaty ending the war in that building, okay? But it didn't look like that. The not looking like that is interesting because the reason it doesn't look like that is that in 1802, the building burned down. Whoops. Now, it was just gutted. It didn't fall to the ground, but it was gutted. The fire in 1802 was started by a student protest, okay? Princeton University does not admit this. You have to look in other sources to find out about that, but there you are. And this is at a time when University of Virginia is having vandalism problems, Hampden-Sydney is having vandalism. We'll get back to some of those. But we didn't burn down any of the buildings, okay, particularly not anything that size. They raised money, which the College of New Jersey was able to do pretty well because it was near New York, and New York has always been money. In 1855, it burned down again, this time apparently by an accident. But by this time, they had enough money that they could build it back on a positively lavish scale, which is where the 50-foot cupola came from. And there was a lot of complaint about that. They had messed up a classic building, but it stayed. And so there you are. But the College of New Jersey was a flat-out Presbyterian college. It had its faculty set up to teach the right thing. The courses were the right courses. And so what Hanover Presbytery did was to start copying the College of New Jersey every place they could. And the first thing, if you open to the first double-page spread in any book that you got, this is the minutes or abbreviated minutes from every Presbyterian meeting in 1774 and 1775. And if you look at the top one, the earliest one, get my copy off. It says, we'd like to do this, but we don't know how. basically. And they do a couple of bad things. One of the bad things is that they call it a seminary. Now, that's what they want, all right, but you mustn't say that word. Not if you want to get that through the legislature. Notice they only get down 3 lines till they get to Samuel Stanhope Smith, and 1 more line till they get to New Jersey College. Now, they are giving credit, okay, but in sort of a left-handed way, they never admit that they're copying everything they possibly can, right down to stealing a custom door from New Jersey, the College of New Jersey. But this Samuel Stanhope Smith looks like being good news, and in fact he is. He's one of the things Hampden-Sydney has done right in the 250 years. And he shows up very early in the discussion here. In 1772, there had been an effort to start a college down here. And people went, apparently, and I can't find any records of this, but they apparently went to the some appropriate meeting of the presbytery and said, let's start a college. And people with a little bit of judgment said, that's not a bad idea. Who's going to railroad it for you? Who's going to run this? Don't know. Haven't picked them out yet. How are you going to raise the money? Hadn't planned that yet. A couple other questions like that. Following which they said, tell you what, go off and get your ducks in a row, and then come back when you have things lined up and you know what you're going to do, and we'll look at it. And this is round 2, where they're bringing something back. And what they've done is to go to the College of New Jersey and say, who have you got that we could get to be head of our new college? Now, Samuel Stanhope Smith, we might as well go to hands. Here he is. He's got white hair, but you do recognize that that's a powdered wig, a la George Washington. The face in front of that looks remarkably young, okay? Anybody in here 21? 22? Shut up. Okay. We don't have anybody eligible. If anybody I had one more notch. If anybody was 23, I was going to say you're the right age to take over as president of Hampden-Sydney. Because the Samuel Stanhope Smith they're talking about here is 23 years old. He has graduated, his father is a Presbyterian minister in central Pennsylvania. What a surprise. And his father is, at that point, a trustee of College of New Jersey. And boy has gone with the idea of getting the standard Presbyterian ministerial training and becoming ordained and being a Presbyterian minister. And so he finishes and he's valedictorian of his class. And at that point he's 21. And he needs a job for a year while he takes some more theology courses. So and Princeton has an academy for people who don't have the training to go to college. And he becomes a tutor in the academy. And he does that for 1 year, okay? Tutors the 9th grade squad. And this gets you the language. We are well informed, has taught a considerable time with approval in New Jersey College. Well, that considerable time is 1 year, and he was being a tutor to the remedial classes. Okay. Well, creative minute writing was not invented by Presbyterians. But anyway, he obviously is smart, and he's ordained, and that sounds like making him a pretty good presidential candidate. So they get in touch with him, and he said, "Yeah, I could think about that, but I need to know something about what's going on. I mean, the concept is okay, but I need to see more ducks in a row." So this gets you to the second one of these, which is a whole month later, okay? November 12th. Actually, it's not a whole month. And in the meantime, they have stacked enough ducks up in a row that he has obviously signed up. Samuel Stanhope Smith is now on the payroll. And this is a list of what he's going to teach, which is everything. Okay? And this is very much the standard college curriculum handout for pretty much every English-speaking college in Britain or the U.S. So this is not exactly news, but you can look at it and see that we're talking about if a student goes through this, never mind if it's all taught by Smith or not. If a student goes through this, he has had a pretty darn good humanities education. But notice at the bottom that of the second paragraph that we're not talking about a seminary anymore, we're talking about an academy. And Samuel Stanhope Smith, while signing up to be the rector of this organization, Bad does not want the evil word Presbyterian said in anything that's written down. Don't want to thought it was a church school. He wants it to be a church school. He just doesn't want that label pasted on it. So, okay, November 1774. He's agreed to run this thing, and what needs to happen next is we need to raise some money. Not like the money required to build Nassau Hall, okay? We just need to raise some money. And what happens between the middle of November 1774 and the 1st of February 1775 is that Samuel Stanhope Smith, who is an ordained minister and has been for a full 20 minutes, goes around to all the churches around here and preaches a stem-winding sermon on how you need to give money to build a Presbyterian college over here in Prince Edward County. And he collects 1,300 pounds, which is around $5,000 or $6,000, which in 1775 is a lot of money. You can build a brick house for about $1,000. Okay, we got enough to build 6 brick houses. But you look at what the money's going to be spent on. Ordered that 400 pounds be applied to purchase such books and mathematical and philosophical apparatuses are more immediately necessary. And considering the non-importation agreement, war's about to start here, may continue a considerable time, we entrust Mr. Samuel Stanhope Smith to purchase such books and apparatus in the northern provinces. You go to Philadelphia where you can get these things. By and with the advice and concurrence of the Reverend Robert Smith of Pequea. Who he? That's Daddy. Okay? His principal advisor on this, as appointed by the Presbytery, is his father. And then the Reverend Robert Davidson, Mr. John Byard, merchant, okay. I looked them up, and you can't find out much about them, but they're good appointees. These are serious people with the merchant in particular have the money, and they're committed to this urge. But there's a list of people that are supposed to collect the 400 pounds and pass it along to Samuel Stanhope Smith and then provide advice. Okay, next day, February 2nd, we're not through here. We're gonna put this somewhere in Prince Edward County, and this meeting is being held down at Slate Hill, okay? Because Slate Hill has a little building, the birthplace has a little building that's the right size for a small meeting that goes on all day. And they have, in the meantime, before this meeting came on, found 3 people who would give them a substantial amount of land to put a campus on. And so they seem to spend most of the morning of February 2nd touring the places that they have access to. And the one they like is on Hudson's Branch, now known as College Road. And Peter Johnson is willing to give them 100 acres there. Now, we'll look at I got topographic maps, and next week we'll look at some of them, and if you look at them, you realize that the 100 acres Peter Davidson gave them could not be farmed by an acrobat. It's gullies 80 feet deep, okay? And, okay, the college has never been able to build on more. The reason we have the woods with the trail through them is there's nothing else you can do over there. Okay. Now, travel is a problem. Smith is going to need advice all along through here. And we need people to give him advice, and that means he needs to have a sort of board of trustees from people that are right around here that can come to a morning meeting and have it only mean an hour and a half on a horse. And so we're going to have, and they have this list: Reverend Messrs. Richard Sankey, John Todd, Caleb Wallace, Samuel Leake, Mr. Peter Johnson, donor of the land, Colonel Paul Carrington. They got about a dozen people, and all of these Venable, does that name sound familiar? All of these live around here and can come to meetings. And a quorum is only half of them, okay? So, yes, we can get things done here. Now, later on, the trustees get expanded to about 25 by adding postal trustees who are not expected to go to meetings because they live too far away. And they get good advice. We'll come back to some of the good advice from postal trustees. But February 3rd, the Presbytery formally elects Samuel Stanhope Smith, rector of the Prince Edward Academy. And we entrust the Sid Smith and the Reverend Robert Smith of Pennsylvania, yes, thank you, and Mr. William Churchill Houston, professor in New Jersey College. Hadn't heard about him before, and he's an interesting guy. He's professor of natural history, not religion, and not any of the humanities areas either. And in only about 2 years after he finishes this advisory hitch, he quits his job at College in New Jersey and apprentices to a lawyer because he's interested in becoming a lawyer, and he means not somebody who is going to sue people for not paying their rent. This is constitutional law, theoretical law kind of thing. And he does that, and he's really, really good at it. And he becomes the secretary, but responsible for all the wording of the New Jersey Supreme Court. They write something, he cleans it up. And when the nation decides in, 1785, 86, that the Articles of Confederation are not really working, they appoint a 5-man committee nationally to suggest ways to improve the Articles of Confederation, and they appointed Houston. And he wrote something that all but recommended doing away with them and trying again, without quite having it say that. And people agreed to it, whereupon he was appointed to the Constitutional Commission. And the Constitution that got written may well have been James Madison, but a lot of it was cleaned up by William Churchill Houston, okay? Now, tuition, this is where they get in trouble. Tuition is going to be £4 for a year. I assume that it doesn't sound like very much money to you. It didn't sound like very much money to them either. £4 was somewhere in the neighborhood of $20-ish. And $20 was a significant amount of money, but not if you're talking about sending your son to school for a whole year. Back here. That's tuition. Well, now I've lost it, but someplace in here, maybe it's on the next page. It's going to cost $10 for room and board. At £10. So for £14, sort of $50. You can send your kid away for a whole year and feed him and everything and have him learn the things that you don't know enough to teach him. This is an attractive offer, okay? And I would say only that this is February 3rd, 1775. 5 weeks from now, Patrick Henry is going to give the Liberty to Death speech to the Virginia Parliament, Virginia legislature. 10 weeks from now, Paul Revere is going to make his midnight ride, followed by the gunfight at Concord, Massachusetts. And only 4 months from now is going to be the Battle of Bunker Hill. This is coming fast, and this does not make it sound like a good time to start a college up, but we're going to do it. So they put newly hired Samuel Stanton Smith to work, and if you flip over a page, this is September of 1775. The poor devil's only been on the job 6 months, and he's had to build the campus by cutting down all those trees first. He has nothing to start with. And he is pretty much, he's almost through with a 3-story brick building, which is going to be the college, okay? And they have built a bunch of other, 1,300 pounds is a lot of money, but not when you have a whole bunch of buildings to put up. And so all the other buildings they put up in a big hurry in 1775 are frame construction, and furthermore, they're made out of the cheapest wood they can find and throw up. They are thrown together because they have to build them fast and cheap. And this is okay until 40 years of adolescent boys kick them apart, which is what happened. We'll get back to that. But Samuel Stanton Smith has time to write a pretty good ad, which you've probably seen this one before. It runs twice in the Virginia Gazette, which is the Williamsburg newspaper, and it's the only newspaper Virginia has. And he is very buoyant about this. Their zeal for the interests of learning and virtue has met with such success that they were enabled to let the buildings in March last to several undertakers, contractors, who were proceeding in their work with the greatest expedition. And they were driving nails like man-killing bees. Very valuable library, the best writers, all that, yes, thank you. The number of visitors and trustees will probably be increased as soon as the interaction of the times, how delicate, shall so far. So the rates at the utmost will not exceed 10 pounds currency per annum to the steward, the board money, and 4 pounds tuition money. 20 shillings that's always being paid up front when you come in. And the last paragraph is an assurance that this is a college, but we're not going to make it a mandatory Presbyterian kind of activity. If you come here and your faith is Anglican or Methodist or something else, we can't guarantee that there'll be a church convenient for you. But if you want to go somewhere else to church, you certainly can. We'll give you full credit for it, and we'll keep anybody from bugging you about it. You will not be proselyted while you're on our campus. And the one other thing he does is down in the middle of the first paragraph. It is to be distinguished by the name of Hampden-Sydney. Where'd that come from? It's been the academy in Prince Edward up to this point. Hampden and Sydney are both English heroes of the English Civil War. Well, Hampden, the Civil War. Hampden was killed in a battle. Sydney was executed for writing a book called Principles of Government, which said that the king's duty was always to work for the citizens of the country by doing what the citizens wanted done. And if he repeatedly refused to do what the citizens clearly wanted done, the citizens had the right to depose him. And deposing him might involve making sure he didn't get in the way anymore by actually breathing. And for writing that book, Sidney was executed. And that he was executed only about a year before. This is under James II. It's only about a year before the Glorious Revolution, when England finally decided to make the king a constitutional monarch and prevent any of this kind of stuff. But hey, he was already dead. But he has been a big hero in the American Revolution. I got to quit here, but John Adams had an active correspondence before the war with people who wanted to know how he thought things were developing, and it had reached a stage in which they couldn't trust Parliament to pass any kind of favorable legislation anymore. They had to count on the king to overrule Parliament. And somebody wrote Adams, and said, I see no future of this. What are we going to do if the king doesn't support us? And Adams wrote him back, we shall deal with the king as Brutus, Cassius, Hampden, and Sidney would have. And those two names became watchwords of the revolution, and they are not religious. They're strictly political. And choosing that name, I think, nobody will say this, but I think that was Samuel Stanhope Smith's decision, and he wanted a name that didn't sound Presbyterian because he did not want to spend all his time fighting the Anglican authorities. Anyway, we'll pick up on the buildings that went up next week. Now, let me ask you to bring this back for about 3 weeks because there's obviously more here that we haven't got to. But thank you very much. See you next week.